April 1945. Dachau concentration camp. 1 hour after liberation. The camp was chaos. American soldiers moving through the buildings, survivors being helped out, evidence being documented. Then something happened that no one had planned. Someone started shooting. An American sergeant had found 40 SS guards who had been running the camp, men who had been there for years, men who had watched prisoners die every day. The sergeant didn't take them prisoner. He lined them up against a wall, and he gave an order. 40 SS guards were dead within minutes. When the report reached Patton, he went silent. His men had just executed prisoners, under American command. After the war was effectively over, what Patton did next would divide his officers and force him to make the hardest decision of the entire occupation. Before we get into what happened next, if you want more untold stories from World War II, hit that subscribe button. April 29th, 1945, was supposed to be a day of liberation. The 45th Infantry Division reached Dachau that morning. The soldiers knew something of what they would find. Reports had been coming in for weeks. But there is a difference between hearing about something and walking into it. The men who went through those gates were not prepared for what was inside. Bodies were stacked in railroad cars outside the camp walls. More were piled along the perimeter, and more still inside the barracks. Survivors moved toward the Americans on legs that could barely carry them. Some were too weak to speak. Some had stopped believing that this day would ever come. The American soldiers who walked through Dachau that morning saw things that changed them permanently. Many of them said later that nothing in their training or their experience of war had prepared them for what they found inside the walls. The scale of it, the deliberateness of it, the fact that it had been running for years methodically as a matter of policy. That was the state of mind those soldiers were in when they found the SS guards. A group of SS guards had been gathered in a courtyard near the camp wall. Some had surrendered as soon as the Americans arrived. Others had been pulled from various parts of the compound. They were being held under guard, waiting to be processed as prisoners of war. Sergeant Peter Walsh had been inside the camp for less than 2 hours. He had walked through the barracks. He had seen the gas chambers. He had looked at the railroad cars. Then he walked into the courtyard. He stood there for a moment, looking at the SS guards. Then he made a decision. He ordered 40 of them lined against the wall. What followed took less than 3 minutes. The report reached Patton's headquarters that evening. His aide, Colonel Richard Hayes, delivered it in person. "Sir, we have a serious situation at Dachau. Following liberation this morning, soldiers from the 45th executed approximately 40 SS guards who were in custody. The men had surrendered and were unarmed." Patton read through the report without speaking. When he finished, he didn't immediately respond. He set the papers down and looked out the window for a long moment. What had those soldiers been through before it happened, he asked. "Walk me through what they saw inside the camp." Hayes told him. The bodies in the railroad cars, the gas chambers, the survivors who weighed 60 pounds, what the barracks looked like, what the record showed about how long the camp had been operating. Patton listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he said, "I want a full account, every detail of what happened and in what order. Get me the names of the men involved and exactly how this unfolded." The investigation that followed took several days. It was conducted quietly, through the chain of command, with soldiers from the 45th interviewed about what they had witnessed and what had occurred in the courtyard. What emerged was not a simple picture. The soldiers who carried out the executions had not acted randomly. They had spent hours inside a death camp before the shooting began. They had seen things that no military experience had prepared them for. The decision Walsh made had come out of that specific experience, in that specific place, on that specific morning. None of that made it legal. Under the established laws of war, SS guards who had surrendered were entitled to prisoner of war status. Executing them after they had laid down their weapons was a violation, regardless of what those men had done while running the camp. Patton understood this completely. He also understood something else. He had been to Dachau himself, 2 days after liberation. He had walked through liberation. He had walked through it, had seen what the soldiers of the 45th had seen, and he had come back from that visit shaken in a way that very little had shaken him during 4 years of war. He met with his officers to discuss the findings. "What's the recommendation?" Patton asked. There was a silence in the room. One of his senior officers spoke carefully. "Sir, technically these men committed a violation of the laws of war. The question is whether you pursue formal proceedings." Patton looked around the room. "And if we did pursue them? A court-martial. A jury of soldiers who have also seen what's in that camp. What happens?" Nobody answered that directly. Patton made his decision. He would not bring court-martial charges. The incident would be documented and The investigation would remain on record, but no formal proceedings would follow. The following day he issued a written directive to his commanders. It said nothing about what had already happened at Dachau. It addressed only what will be expected going forward. Soldiers under this command are expected to uphold the laws of war in all circumstances. Prisoners who have surrendered are to be treated according to established military procedure. I will not accept any deviation from this standard. The conduct of this army reflects the values of the nation it represents. The directive was unambiguous about the future. It said nothing about the past. Patton never made a public statement about the Dachau executions. In private, he spoke about it rarely. Colonel Hayes recalled one conversation about a week after the investigation was closed. He said he had thought about it every day since the report came in. He knew what the correct legal answer was. But he said he had also walked through that camp, and he wasn't certain that the legally correct answer and the human answer were the same thing in this particular case. The incident remained out of public view for years. When the records eventually became available, historians and legal scholars spent decades examining it. The arguments on both sides have never fully resolved. Some concluded that Patton made the only reasonable decision available to him given the circumstances. Others argued that by not prosecuting, he established that military law applied selectively, that certain crimes could go unanswered depending on what had come before them. Sergeant Walsh returned to the United States after the war. He rarely discussed what had happened. Late in his life, he was asked about it once, directly. "I know what the rules say," he said. "I knew them then. I had been in that camp all morning. I made a decision. I've thought about it since. I don't know if it was right. I know why I did it." Was Patton right to close the investigation without charges? And was Walsh's decision understandable? Or does the law have to apply regardless of what came before it? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about the World War II and what real strength means, make sure to subscribe. Difficult moral decisions of World War II, make sure to subscribe.